Hi, Tom McKeown, Your True Change, where we combat obesity and poverty at the same time because we believe that both are interlinked and that by getting rid of both in person will lead to a lifetime of success and lifetime of prosperity. Back, of course, here to the top five spot, and today we're going to talk about the top five things you need to know about one of my favorite personal development and business books of all time, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, by Robert Kiyosaki. If you guys haven't had a chance to take a look at this yet, I strongly suggest that you do. It's a phenomenal book. It was written back in 1997, and I think there have actually been a couple of different versions written over the years. Robert Kiyosaki and I think his son Guy Kiyosaki have gone on to write many more books and done things with Donald Trump, and they've created classes and all types of seminars, both paid and free, all over the U.S. In result of the success of this book. I myself, someone that was in the finance sector, just think that this book is so great for people who don't really know that much about finance or the stock market or numbers or money or anything, but know that they probably should know a little bit more. This right here is probably the perfect book for you to read to kind of ease your way into knowing a little bit more, because it's not complicated. It's very, very easy, very elementary, very basic, and it really relates to every person out there. So let's talk about the top five things that you need to know about this book and really why it's so important, I think, for the average person, and why this book is such a powerful force in business and personal development. Number one thing that I learned from Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the rich don't work for money. We all believe out there that everyone has to work for money to get a paycheck, right? Well, the reality is from what Robert Kiyosaki says, it's really just the middle class and the poor that work for the paycheck to worry about paying their bills. The rich, what they do is they have their money work for them. And I'm going to get into that in one of my points later when he talks about how the rich basically buy assets, where the poor basically just get a job to make money, and of course the money goes back to the government. So the money pays more taxes from the poor and the middle class than the rich pay when they get their money, and of course it pays for a ton of bills. Whereas the rich basically buy assets, and what an asset is, as I'll get to, is basically something that makes you more money. So the rich do not work for money, while the poor and the middle class do. Number two, the rich work to learn. They don't learn to work. So the poor and the middle class are focused on formal education. Let me go to college, let me get a master's, let me get a PhD, let me be some super educated, wazoo, doctor, blah, 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 blah. Not that those people can't make a lot of money, it's that most of their money goes back to the government and to paying expenses, okay? Whereas the rich are basically, they're getting their education from what I guess most of you would consider to be the school of hard knocks, from pure experience, right? From opening businesses, from working in different types of jobs, different types of industries, to kind of learn and to get that broad-based experience to go on and to really be good business people and good sound business people, right? And Robert Kiyosaki talks about how his poor dad was his father, who was a super educated, smart guy, but who was really stuck in a government job, was overtaxed, spent way too much money on different things, and really had debt up to his eyeballs, paying off loans and credit and mortgages and all this types of stuff. Whereas his rich dad had virtually no or very little debt, and had paid off everything and had lots of money to play around with and to further invest. And it was really all because of how they understood, or really their deep level of a financial literacy. So if you work to learn as a rich person, and you're a more financially literate, if you understand how the stock market works, if you know the difference between an asset and a liability, if you know stuff about real estate investing, if you know really how money works and taxes work, that right there is going to be the true education you really need to know in order to become rich, okay? And of course that leads to the third point, which is that the rich acquire assets, okay? And of course, while most of the middle class and poor tend to acquire more liabilities, the rich, of course, acquire assets. Assets are something that you buy that produces income, whereas a liability is really just an expense. Okay, and if you take a look here in the book, he goes to show that an asset, of course, is something um, that is going to produce more money, whereas a liability is something that's just going to go right to expenses, right? So, a paycheck from a job, that's going to be taxed. It's just going to go to paying your bills. Whereas if you buy a bond or a stock, in some cases real estate, but, really, bonds, stocks, other businesses, those types of assets are going to generate you more cash flow, okay? A job, of course, it's a paycheck that goes to taxes, a mortgage, a fixed expense. Whereas, if you buy an asset, that's going to bring you back more cash flow. So that's really what the main difference is. Instead of spending your money on all this different stuff that most of the middle class and sports and like poor spend it on, with all these like big credit card bills, getting their checks from the government, or from a job where they have to pay lots of taxes. The rich are basically taking their money. They're not putting it into savings accounts and just saving it and saving it and saving it. They're putting it to work, okay, into the stock market, into good real estate deals, into businesses. And that's really a major difference between the rich and the poor, where the rich are buying assets and the poor buying liabilities. Number 4, oops, upside down. Number 4, mind your business. And really what this is the rich are buying businesses. The poor are getting jobs. The poor and the middle class are just going through careers where they're getting these paychecks, as I mentioned, that goes to the government and to paying off their debt and their expenses, and they can have barely, not too much left over, right? And if they ever go beyond their means, which, let's face the facts, in 21st century America, that's what we do, you're just going to owe more and more and more and more and more debt. The rich are constantly putting their money to work, as I mentioned, and the rich know that if you have your own business and you pay corporate taxes, you pay either half or less than half what you'd pay, say, if you were a W-2 employee. Okay, so that's just one example of one of the main benefits that you get as a business owner, and Kiyosaki points that out when he says mind your business. And of course, the 5th is the rich are always looking for ways to invent money, right? The rich are not looking for ways to save money, to not spend money. They're not always playing defense, right? They're not always thinking, okay, how can I mitigate the damages, mitigate my losses? Why don't instead I focus on how I can make more money and be more creative? Robert Kiyosaki gives an example of how the real estate market where he was living one time was really, really, really poor, and what he decided to do was to get creative. And instead of going to a realtor and looking for listings in a down market that of course was a buyer's market, he actually went to bankruptcy auctions. And he gave an example of how he saw a house that was on the market for $75,000, and he actually got it for $20,000. Okay, and he didn't have to put $20,000 down. He only had to put $2,000 down because it was a negotiated deal. And he got that $2,000 via financing. $2,000 when you get something financed is not a lot, as most of you know. So he only paid $200, and then of course he was on the hook to pay interest toward a $20,000 mortgage. Okay, for what was worth $75,000 property. He then went into the papers and he advertised $75,000 house for $60,000. Okay, and of course he got tons of buyers thinking that they were getting this great value, great deal. He sold the house for $60,000. Okay, of which he only paid $20,000 for, which he only got a mortgage of a $2,000, and he only paid $200. So he basically paid $200, and he flipped it and made $60,000. Is that an opportunity that you're going to find every day growing off the trees? Of course not. But the point is, the rich are always looking for ways to make money, and that's just simply one example. So this is such a great book because it shows how people like you and I can really just make money in all different kinds of ways, and really what we need to know that really was not taught to us in school, was not taught to us by most of our parents, and is not being talked about or not understood as common knowledge by most people who we affiliate ourselves with, right? So if you read this book, you'll understand how the rich think and really how the rich truly make money, okay? It's usually in ways that we don't think, And I really think that if most of us take the principles of this book and start to act or start to implement it into our lives, we will experience more financial success. So once again, top 5 spot, back to your true change, combating obesity and poverty. This was brought to you by Body by Vi, the 90-day challenge. Lose up to 37 pounds in 90 days. If you want to join the challenge, you can see my link on the bottom of this video. Tom McKeown, yourtruechange.com. Thanks for joining. Have an awesome day.